Welcome back to another episode of This Life's the Pits. And today I have an amazing guest, Erin. Erin Howe. It's Howe, correct?
Yeah.
Um, so I met Erin. Not only does she have an amazing name, but I met Erin through recently, really, through a mutual friend, colleague. I don't even know what you would describe as Desiree, but she's
Mhm.
just a cool person.
She is.
Yeah, she's just such a and it's funny, I didn't even tell you this. So I met Jesse, her husband,
Oh,
through my old coach, my first coach that I had a couple years ago, who has now become one of my closest friends.
oh my gosh.
I met Jesse through her. I had Jesse on the podcast a couple years ago because
What?
I'm like, his story's amazing. I got to know him. He started following me and then I followed him and I'm like, want to be on the podcast? Come on on.
Oh
He
my gosh.
story and what he does. And then I met Desiree through him. And then like flash forward 2 years later, and she's like, "Hey, do you want to be a part of this book series? Do you want to
Uh,
be an author with all these amazing women?" And I was like, I don't know if I'm capable of doing that, but
oh,
this sounds amazing. And so like that led me to you, which
isn't
is
that funny? Such a small world.
I love it. And we both live in Rochester. Like I
Yep.
feel like I should know you. Like we should have crossed paths because we're sort of in similar lines of work and like
Yeah,
what we do. So
totally.
anyway, that's a really long tangent story, but I met Erin through a mutual friend, Desiree. We are both co-authoring a book together, which I've gotten to know Erin the last month or two-ish, and just like every time I hear you talk, you just have like such a good spirit and you have such good stories. And I follow your social media. Not only are your kids hilarious, because your one son called 911, but so fun. So I want to turn it over to you to sort of just tell who you are, what you do for a living, and as a not a stay-at-home mom, as a homeschool mom as well, which is
Mhm.
like, and you have high level job. Like, I don't know how you do it all, but share with my peeps what you do, who
Sure.
you are, and kind of just what's on your heart today.
Okay. Well, I so technically I'm a DNP, which stands for Doctor of Nursing Practice. But clinically I'm a nurse practitioner. And I just do adults and more typically geriatrics. That's mostly what my career has been in. Ever since I was a little kid, I loved geriatrics. So my very first job was at a nursing home, Fairport Baptist Homes, and I would just like ride my bike up there, and I was like a candy striper. I'd like deliver the mail, I would do all of that stuff. And I just fell in love with it. So that population of people, older folks, has always just like I'm an old soul, I guess, right? We always used to, my friends used to tease me. They would say, if there was like a grandfather walking with his grandbaby in the park, everyone would be like, "Oh, what a cute baby," and Aaron would be like, "Oh, what a cute grandpa." And I mean, it's just the truth, right?
Yeah.
So, so yeah, so I sort of worked my way through, and I probably went to school too long, but I ended up teaching at the University of Rochester for many years in their nursing and their doctoral program. And then I pretty much spent most of my career working at nursing homes locally. And then when my son was born, I decided that I would, try and stay home more. So I have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old terrorist. I mean, a 4-year-old son. So, so for a long time there, I was just kind of mom. And then when the pandemic hit and my son was going into kindergarten in 2020, and he was sort of a typical like anxious first kid, and I was just really worried that he would have hangups, like having to go to school and mask, and he can't talk to people, and there's germs everywhere. I just didn't want him to freak out, and so I said to my husband, I said, why don't we just keep him home? It's just kindergarten, and we had other friends that were doing it. And so that's what we ended up doing. So I had this like glorified like play group. I had like 10 kids that would come over. We would do like a science experiment, we'd do art class, we'd go out and play. Um, and so there's this amazing, wonderful homeschooling community in Rochester. And and we sort of developed into this hybrid because they go a couple days a week to a drop-off program. It's called Teach to Learn. It's at a church in Henrietta. So they have like other, classmates and other people that are teaching them. So it's not just me. Um, but it has kind of become this lifestyle that we love. It affords us a lot of opportunities to be together. We have a home in Florida, condo that we can kind of pick up and go whenever, which is really nice. So, for really the last 10 years, I was working, here and there, but mostly raising my kids. And then my dad ended up passing away, actually in 2020. And it was sort of an impetus to me to write a book. So, and I played around with this in my head, for many years. And he had always wanted to write a book. So it was sort of significant to me.
Yeah.
And mostly, what I saw in my career, because I worked with people, at the sort of more the end of life, is, nobody knew what to do when clearly things were changing medically, right? So your parents are aging, they're living at home, maybe they're falling, maybe you're afraid they're going to fall, maybe they're having some dementia or just cognitive changes. And you have these siblings of yours who maybe live all over the country. And it's like, what are we going to do about mom and dad? And how do we decide? How do we pay for it? How do we get them into a facility if even that's what we think we should do? So most of my career was really spent talking to families about what to do in these situations, right? Getting everybody on the same page. How do you get your sister out in California who doesn't recognize that mom has dementia?
Yeah.
And you're the sister here in Rochester who is doing everything and you're burned out
Yep.
and it's not a safe situation. So what I ended up, one of the things that when I was teaching at the U of R, I taught a course called Crucial Conversations. And it's about how to have high level conversations when emotions are strong, opinions differ, and it's a really important topic. Okay. So partly I just started to have these families use those little tips to try and get them to talk to one another and get everyone on the same page. And that is always the hardest, but the most important thing to do, right? So everyone needs to be able to say their piece in sort of a safe environment. And just to say, maybe one sister's like, look, I don't want mom and dad to leave. I think that they could be safe at home. We just need to get them like aids and we need to modify the house. And somebody else is going to say, they're really isolated. They would do better in a facility, or, they have more support. So that is the first piece. So this book that I wrote, it's called Caring for Aging Loved Ones, and it's a comprehensive guide to navigating the healthcare system while avoiding caregiver burnout. And basically, it guides you through. So it starts with having that conversation. So I give tips about crucial conversations, like the tools to actually have that conversation. And then I talk about how we assess how safe someone is at home and what their needs are. So we have a whole variety of tests. Like one is called a tug test, where you have them stand up and walk across the room and you see how safe they are. Are they at risk for falls? We look at activities of daily living, like how much assistance do they need to get dressed, to get bathed, are they safe to cook food? Then we look at depression scores, right? So a lot of times as people age, depression is a huge issue that underlies so many of the physical and mental things that are going on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways that we assess that. And then so you have this conversation, you figure out what you want to do. Well, then how do we pay for it? Like, who pays for this? How do you find a bed, right? As a social worker, like, that this is a huge issue, right? Especially if you're trying to go from your home in the community to a facility, like, forget about it. Like, it's really hard to find a bed.
Yeah, those packets are a lot of work, and
Yes.
it's always like I feel like there's like 50 places and it's like circle 20.
Yeah.
And
Right.
we'll see what comes back, you know? And
Right.
it's like you have to try to put it out to so many because there's just not
Yeah.
enough.
No. And it used to be bad, and then the pandemic hit, and now it's so much worse because now we have fewer beds, and the places are more short staffed.
Well, and we're
Um,
coming up on that baby boomer generation
oh
too,
yeah. Oh
where
yeah.
it's like, because my parents are of that generation, and
Yeah.
like they're in okay health. They've had some health scares and they've had some things, but
Sure.
like a lot of their friends
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
been struggling or have passed away or have various different, conditions at this point, and it's like I can see that that's like it's on the horizon, and it's very
Yeah.
there's a huge population, especially in Rochester, of
Right. And the biggest thing that I see is that people, like, at some intellectual level, know that they should have this conversation, but emotionally they do not want to talk about this.
hard.
And so what ends up happening is that they don't have the conversation until mom falls, breaks her hip, and ends up in the hospital. And then you're forced to have that conversation. And then all of your options and your choices are kind of taken away from you. So you need to have that conversation before something happens, before people are emotional and upset and ill. That's the biggest thing that I encourage people to do is that no matter how much you don't want to do it, you will regret if you don't have that conversation beforehand. And sometimes people are surprised talking to their parents about what they want. They think they know, but until you actually ask them, and then they may say, oh, I don't want to do X, Y, or Z. And you're like, but why? Then you have to discuss, like, what are the real motivations there? Like, are they worried about money, or are they worried about something else? Um,
I'm
you
pulling
know,
up right now because I'm going to make sure that I um, attach it to the show notes here too,
oh, okay.
so people can have access to it. But I'm just pulling it
Oh,
up. I can see it too. But yeah, I feel like it's just something that can help so many people. I've had so
mhm.
many conversations, and to your point, it doesn't have to be all like when you're in the hospital, and now the first thing that happens as soon as you enter the hospital is discharge planning starts.
Yeah.
The
Right.
that care team is like, how are we going to get you out? Right. And so
Yeah.
it's crunch time, and you have to be forced to have like this rapid fire conversation where you have the luxury right now potentially to do
Yeah.
it in stages. It's like, let's just
Yes.
sit down and talk about what you want. Talk
Yep.
about if something happens to you, or if God forbid you don't have capacity, like what are your wishes? And then you can
Hmm.
have that sort of conversation that can then lead into other conversations,
Yeah.
over time, so you can lay the groundwork,
Yeah.
where it's not like you're coming in hot of like,
Yeah.
fall, what are we
Yeah.
doing? How much money do you have for this? And what's in your, retirement fund? It's like those are hard conversations, especially for, to have with your parents
Hmm.
that have worked so hard, especially of that generation that's
Yeah.
like it's taboo to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
So kind of building that, like this is something I've had to do with my parents a little bit. I've sort of like, because my husband and I have a will, but
Yeah.
I asked my parents a couple times, like, hey, do you guys have, no, we're working on it. Okay, great. Like what are the things, what are we doing here? What would you guys want? And it's just it feels really morbid and like awful.
Right. It does. It
But
does.
also, like, the best thing you could do for the people you love is
Yeah.
to prepare them for something tragic that
Right.
when they pass,
Hmm.
just know what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, right. I mean, there's no easy way to go about it, right? But if depending on the circumstances under which you're doing it, it can be a lot easier or a lot harder. um and other things too, like, I've seen a lot of patients who, like, a spouse like was in the service, and they are not collecting any benefits from the VA, or or maybe they have monies that they could be getting to help with this. And all of that stuff is important to look into, especially if you're like, okay, we should go, we're gonna think about going to, like, assisted living or something. I mean, these things are so expensive, but if you have monies that you're not collecting on, that are available to you, we had a guy from the VA come, and he said there's so many people that just don't utilize their full benefits. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so, and then, so I go through all of that, and then I talk, about, bereavement and grieving and the stages of grief, at the end of life, and like the difference between hospice and palliative care. Because most people,
Don't
even
understand.
medical professionals
I
do
know.
not understand the difference.
No.
So, that's a big thing, really, because, they both, palliative care is a philosophy of care, whereas hospice is a payment system, right? And so a lot of differences. So hospice is a much stricter rule rollout thing because that is them paying. You get, for the government. Hold on, buddy. I'm in the middle of something. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
The 4-year-old.
I love when
Okay.
that happens.
I know. I know.
My kids often barge in too. It's
Oh
fine.
my gosh. Oh my gosh. Just go ahead, bud. Go to the bathroom and wipe, okay? And then wash your hands. Okay, then have Aubrey check. I'll be right out, okay?
I love it. I love it.
Uh,
No,
so
you just never know what you're gonna get,
you
right?
know, you never know. You really don't.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think
anyway,
this is such a good, like, I have not yet read it, but I have it on my list in my cart of things. So I have like, um, another friend just wrote a book. I actually have two friends that just wrote a book.
oh,
So I have like a bunch in my cart that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get all of these. These are gonna be my like next quarter
I
reads, right?
love it. I love it.
Which is just so great. And it's just, I don't know, but this one I think is just it's gonna help so many people be able to
I
understand
hope so.
some of those things.
And it's really more like it's less than 100 pages. So it's really more of like a guidebook. You know
Yes.
what I mean? So it's like this is the algorithm. These are like the steps you take, and like there's the chapters that kind of guide you through it. And then I just include at the beginning, like a story that's happened to me that's relative to it to make it personal so that, to really tie it in, sort of like my Facebook stories.
Yes. Yes.
So,
It's yeah, and your stuff is so good. Like how it sucks you in, like every
yes.
time, even though it might be super long, sometimes I see your post and I see that it's super long and I'm like, oh, what you got to say today, right? Like, especially that one where your son called 911 from the hotel room, right?
Yes, exactly.
What funny, so funny. Um, but yeah, I mean, it probably wasn't funny in the moment, but
Yes, I was like, what is going on? And, he was just like messing with the phone in the hotel. And I was like, Ben, put the phone down. And then 10 minutes later, knock, knock, knock. I was like, what is going on? Someone called 911 from this room. Benjamin. Okay.
that's
Oh,
so
look. Let me
funny.
see. Oh, yeah. You're good.
That's amazing. I don't want to take up too much time on this but I feel like I got to share this. So, because I think you can like have some to say about this. But my grandpa passed away a while back. It's been a while, but he was just like such an amazing human. So uh, so it was sort of, I mean, his health was like up and down, but like he ended up having I believe it was a heart attack. Was it a heart attack or like aneurysm? Something happened and very abrupt. Like he had had health issues in the past, but like he was pretty healthy at the time. But so we got married and he passed in we got married in September and he passed about a month later.
Oh,
And yeah, so it's been quite a while, but um what's wild is we're sitting around the table, this was a couple days later, maybe like 24 hours, 48 hours later. And my grandma, he used to tell my grandma, if anything happens to me, grab the key and go downstairs in the lockbox and open everything up. And so, and she always used to tell him to like shut up, like knock it off, whatever. And so she goes, well, I guess we should get this box out. Grandpa would want that, whatever. And we're all there, my mom and like her siblings, whatever. So we go down and get the get the box out. I don't think I was there for this part, but they opened it up. Everything was planned out. Like
oh,
his
me.
obituary, everything he wanted. My married name was in there with
Oh,
my husband, like what he wanted my husband to do as a part of his service. Like
oh,
clearly he was updating that like so regularly, right? Like
my,
probably monthly to like make sure that if anything happened, it was all there. So it was like where he wanted his service to be, what he wanted the calling hours to be, who he wanted to do the service, how he had it all planned out.
Oh, what a gift.
Oh my gosh, it was unbelievably amazing. I mean, right down to like what flowers he wanted from which place, like
Oh,
it was all laid out. And my grandma was like, this guy, right? Like this freaking guy. And so it was such a beautiful gift because we didn't have to worry about anything.
exactly. Yeah.
We
Makes
just,
a huge difference.
we were
So,
able to grieve.
yes, just grieve instead of the stress of trying to figure it all out.
Oh,
I love that. I think that's amazing. Actually, we had the opposite experience when my mother-in-law died. And I mean, I talked to my father-in-law about, like you need to make sure that things are in order, that you've talked to her about these things. Oh, yes, he said. Oh, yes, yes, yes. And, we knew she was sick for a year, so it wasn't even sudden. And after she passed, we asked him, and he's like, I don't even know if she wanted a funeral. I was like, but he couldn't bring himself to talk about it. And I mean, that I understand. Like it's hard, it's really challenging, but in the end, that was so much harder for him,
yeah.
that burden, trying to guess and trying to just figure it out.
Yep.
When as if he had just asked her, then it might have been easier on him, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
So
it was such a gift. And so I share that because I think you can appreciate because what in your line of work, working in the nursing home and working with elderly, like you've seen, I know working in the emergency department in a previous role that I've had all sorts of things happen, but
yeah,
um elderly come in and, or even just my age,
yeah,
come in and incapacitated and nobody knows what to do. And then there's arguments and it just
yeah,
creates this like really tumultuous,
yeah.
um, it makes it more difficult.
Right. It
Um,
makes an emotional, hard situation that much more challenging.
yes, yes. And it can tear families apart. I mean,
Oh,
I've
absolutely.
seen fights happen right in the hospital because,
Yeah.
there was no discussion. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's hard, you
It's
know?
right. It's hard and it's sad. And, some of it is unnecessary.
Mm.
It's just breaks your heart.
I know. So I think this is just such a good collection. I'm excited to read it. I think what I might do is utilize it for my parents too and just say,
Oh,
hey,
yay. I
this,
hope so.
you know, read this, get some ideas of how we as your children can support you in, because it's hard too, because I see such a different side of my parents, like especially my dad as he gets older. It's like he's so much more emotional because it's like they're closer to that end than
Yes.
the beginning,
Yeah.
right? And so you
Yeah.
can see every single event that we have, especially when it's involving his grandchildren, like not, I mean, it could be anybody's last, right? But I think there's just that like feeling of like this could be my last. This could be like there's just that more
Yeah.
insight. Um,
Mhm.
so it's really good to like have
Mhm.
maybe a tool to just be like, okay, I need my kids to do this for me, and I need to do this so that they can do this for me, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
No, great.
well, thank you for
Of
sharing that, and thank you for
course.
sharing your story. I'm excited to hear how you sort of this like pre-stage in the book that we're writing together, your chapter around how you got to where you are, and sort of you're like bringing a different angle to things, right? In this new chapter of what we're putting together. So I'm excited to read that.
Oh, good. I love it. It's so fun to just hear where people started and where they ended up, and that journey of getting there is just it's just right. I mean, life, it's incredible.
And then it
Everybody
makes
had
sense.
this
You
great
like put
story.
it together, you're like, of course that happened to me because that had to happen in order for me to like, like in the
Yes.
moment, you're like, why is this happening? But
Yeah.
then once you kind of get to the other side, you're like, okay, universe,
I
yeah,
get
I got it now. Yeah. So beautiful. Well, I'm super grateful that we have connected. I am excited to see kind of where we support
uh,
each other in the future and continue to, I mean, especially being sort of in similar
yeah,
circles of life. So
and having the same name.
I know meant to be. It's meant to be. Uh,
Right.
but thank you for coming on and sharing all of this. And I will certainly, you know, let you know when we post this. Two more quick little things. How can
Yeah.
people find you if they, just want to follow you and your fun stories on the social?
Yeah.
Um, or if they're like, you know what, I know that this individual is a wealth of knowledge in way of this topic of aging, and how can they reach out to you? It's the best.
Yeah. So actually, in the front of my book is my email. So I include that so that people can email me, and I mean I can give it to you too if you want it, but whatever. But yeah, it's right there because I have a lot of people that still reach out to me, and I see people in the community. I do visits for the insurance company, and but I always give them my card, and people will call or their email when they have questions. Like I just I
Beautiful.
I love to be able to help, I it makes me, feel good to share that knowledge that I have.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
best way.
absolutely.
So I will put that in the show notes. So if people want to reach out to you and just connect with you, they
Sure.
can do that. And lastly, how I love to wrap things up with everybody that comes on is if there was one phrase or word or something that like is sort of maybe recently been an anthem of yours, or just something that like you feel like you need to share today, like what's that phrase or word or thing?
Well, it's all for me, it's always been empowerment ever since from the beginning. But how it relates to this in particular is that kind of going back to like people reaching out, I feel like with the knowledge that I have, I feel like I can empower people to make those choices and decisions that are best for them in their life. And I love being able to give that to people, right? It's that idea of like you want to give someone a fish or teach them how to fish,
Yep.
right? And so, I if I can use my candle to light other people's candles so that they can carry on and be successful and do what they need to do in their lives and help their families, to me, that's a big win, you
Yeah,
know?
that's
So,
I love that. I love that. Well,
thank
thank
you.
you for being just and I know I've shared my chapter and my story with you, and you've given me
Mhm.
feedback, and it's just been like there's a connection I felt with you immediately, that you just felt like a safe and kind and like just resourceful, like strong human.
Aw,
And
thank
so I'm
you.
so excited that we're connected. I'm bummed you're not going to be going on this
Oh,
cruise with us, but I'm excited to see what it's
maybe.
like.
I'll look into it some more.
Or maybe a retreat someday for all of us. So
Yes, definitely. That would be fun. For
Warrior
sure.
Women Retreat would be great.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
All right, my love. Well, we will end there. I
Okay.
appreciate you stay right on for a minute, but we're gonna
Yeah.
wrap for the peeps. And thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, Erin.